Энэ бол iPhone 6s. Дэмжих өөрчлөгдөөгүй. Гэхдээ хурууны даралтыг мэдэрнэ. Ингэснээр текстийн мэдээллийг уншихад өөр болсон. Имэйл уншихад, мэдээ уншихад байз. Чи мэдээ уншдаг гэж юу?
Яп.
Тэгэлгүй дээ. Камерын 4К бичлэг хийж, селфи хийхэд дэлгэцэн гэрэлтүүлж өгнө. Энд ч нэг сая лайк цуглуулна да.
Thanks.
Зургнууд нь бас өөрчлөгдөж амьд болсон. Та хүрээд үз. Тийм ээ, энэ бол өөрчлөгдсөн зүйлс.
Сайн байцгаана уу хүнд үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр орой манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Канад улсаас Монгол улсад суугаа онц бөгөөд бүрэн эрхт элчин сайд ноён элко буюу Jager оролцож байна. Good evening, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
So happy to have you on my show. I know it is your first TV interview since being posted in Mongolia. And a lot actually happened since it is August, right? Up to today. A lot happened in between, in the relations between two countries and also in your country back, big election. Does it affect you, that election, as ambassador?
Oh, absolutely. The reality is that as ambassador, I represent the entire country, but I also represent the government of Canada. And so when the government of Canada changes, to some degree, my approach and instructions change. I am a nonpartisan civil servant. I'm responsible for reflecting the whatever government happens to be in power. And so when there's a change of government, there's a change to some degree in my instructions.
Any substantial change in the way you work, or?
I wouldn't say so immediately, but it's more one that takes effect over time. It's not an immediate, we're doing one thing one day and next thing differently the next day. But I mean, we're right now in the middle of a planning exercise for our next fiscal year, which starts on April the 1st of 2016. And the thing that we're looking at first is what is the Prime Minister saying to our ministers about what he wants them to accomplish as new ministers.
Okay.
Well, we look at those mandate letters, which are, interestingly enough, for the first time now publicly available on the Canadian websites.
Please brief us a bit about this political elections, the winning party, and what is that difference that make him or his party, your new Prime Minister, to be elected?
The bottom line is for the last 9 years, Canada has been governed by the Conservative Party of Canada. And in October of this year, on October the 18th, the electorate of Canada saw fit to replace the Conservatives with the Liberal Party of Canada. The Liberal Party of Canada had a relatively small number of seats in the previous parliament, only about 45 out of a total of 310. But for whatever reason, and I would leave that up to the electorate to explain themselves, they decided to elect 185 or so Liberal members to the new parliament.
It's quite a landsliding big change.
It's quite a change. It's not unusual in our systems for governments to be changed fairly dramatically at about the 10 to 15 year mark. So it's not an unusual occurrence in our political history for this kind of swing from one side to the other.
What are the principal differences between Conservatives and Liberals? Is it more like in the UK, or how does it work?
I think it's not unusual, unlike the UK. If I can be really coarsely describe their positions on the political spectrum, you would describe the Conservatives as a centre-right party, whereas you would describe the Liberals perhaps as a centre-left party. We have a third party of substantial size in Canada, the New Democratic Party, which is considered a party of the left. And so for the last 9 years, we have been governed by a center-right party, and the electorate has decided to move towards a party which is more to the center, but to the left side of the center, perhaps.
In which sense the electorate will feel that differences, first of all, or sooner?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's the Liberal Party has put out a platform which the government is seeking to fulfill of greater involvement with foreign affairs such as the UN, climate change. A little different tone, perhaps, with respect to some of our bilateral relationships. These are matters that were set out in the Liberal Party platform, and these are matters that the government has set out in its documents in terms of how it plans to proceed for the next couple of years. The founding document for a government program in Canada is something called the Speech from the Throne. This is a document which is given at the beginning of a public parliamentary session, and the current parliamentary session, the new one after the change in government, began on December the 3rd. And the Governor General, our head of state, sits in front of Parliament and reads a speech which is written by the Prime Minister and his staff that sets out what the government will seek to achieve in the next year.
Very interesting combination. The speech program of new Prime Minister will be sounded by the President. Governor General, who visited Mongolia, by the way, and who also was I was so honored to have your Governor General or President as a guest of my program.
And if I can say, when he sent me a Christmas card 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, he made reference to his fond memories of his trip here, and to his wonderful reception he had from the President and the First Lady, and to the 2 horses which were gifted to him by the President. And the Governor General is very fond of those horses, and I have promised to go look them up for him.
Okay, so you have another good job.
Indeed.
Interesting. If there will be
As
any
ambassador, you have to do a lot of important things.
very important to look after the 2 horses. That change in your government will be anyway, or somehow, or even a little, be reflected in the relations between 2 countries, Mongolia and Canada?
Oh, I wouldn't expect that the change in government is going to have a substantial difference in terms of our bilateral relations. Our bilateral relations, first of all, go back a long ways. We've had diplomatic relations for over 40 years now. We've had missions in each other's capitals. In the case of Mongolia, in Ottawa since 2001. In the case of Canada, in Ulaanbaatar since 2008. We have a strong bilateral relationship, and it's gotten stronger in the last couple of years, and I suspect that will continue. I don't expect that there will be a significant difference as a result of the new government.
See, we had a lot for investors up to now, or for up to last 2 years back, and including a lot Canadians. And how do you see that changes today, from today's, when commodity prices so low, the cycle is different? How do you see that today?
Well, there's 2 sides to that. First of all, there's the really big project, which is in a category all by itself, Oyu Tolgoi. That's a project which is being run now by a multinational company, Rio Tinto, but Rio Tinto bought the company from a Canadian company called Ivanhoe Mines. And there is still a very substantial Canadian interest in Oyu Tolgoi, not only ownership, but also in terms of supply and services, and professional services. And so there's a very real Canadian interest in Oyu Tolgoi. And so when the Rio Tinto company went out looking for international financial institutions to lend it money to be able to do the underground development, one of the institutions they turned to was the Canadian government-owned bank, Export Development Canada. And EDC, as it's known generally, in fact, agreed to invest $750 million in the loan package that was just announced last week, that $4.4 billion.
Wow.
And not only is the Canadian Export Development Canada involved in this financing deal, but there's also one of the Canadian commercial banks, the CIBC, as it's generally known, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce. CIBC has also agreed to pony up $145 million. And that combined total of almost $900 million represents more than 20% of the $4.4 billion that Rio Tinto was able to raise on the markets.
Out of 14 international AAA banks, 2 of them are Canadians, and it is almost $1 billion commitment.
That's absolutely correct.
For 4 years, I understand it'll be by tranches. Next year, it will be about, the country is expecting $700 to $800 million for that project, and the project expecting. And of course, there are a lot of thrilling effect on Mongolian economy.
So that investment is a combination of a acknowledged deposit in the ground,
yes,
the strength of the Rio Tinto company in being able to do that kind of work,
yeah,
and the fact that there is significant enough confidence in the government of Mongolia that this project will go forward and be exploited properly to the benefit of Mongolia and to the investors involved.
This is the key major project for the future of the country today.
Absolutely, and that's how we see it as well.
And you know, sometimes we Mongolians underestimate as you said, the certainty, how much and where under the ground, over about 2 kilometers down, where and about of these minerals. With that certainty, these banks are coming and putting money.
Absolutely,
it's amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely, and the repayment schedule for this is 15-20 years. This is not something that the banks are going to get back in a week or two. This is a long-term loan.
And many things may happen during 20 years.
But I mean, the very first day that I was announced as the new ambassador to Mongolia, I met with someone from Rio Tinto who happened to be in Ottawa that day, and he came and told me about the fact that they have this mine here, which is, you know, a minimum of 40-year life, but probably at least 100-year life. And it's an incredible asset, and it's an incredible element of the Mongolian future that really needs to be nurtured and to be valued. And I believe that this current Mongolian government and the Rio Tinto company are doing all of that.
Цаг хугацаа давтагдчихгүй. Харин түүнийг яаж зөв ашигласнаар бидний амжилт бүтээл, аз жаргал биднийг дагдаг. Урлагийн хүний хувьд гэр бүл, уран бүтээлдээ зарцуулах цагаа зөв зохицуулах хэрэгтэй гэдэг. Бидний хэрэглээ улам ухаалаг болсоор байгаа нь та бүхэнд харагдчих байна. Харин энэ бүхэн надад үнэхээр их таалагдчих.
Ухаалаг орон сууц. King Tower Apartment.
Indeed, this large project ties 2 countries,
absolutely,
businesses, companies, banking businesses. And also another tie, which is great news, with Canada is our one commercial bank has now a stakeholder from Canada. Please tell us about that.
And that's the other element of good news that came about in the last couple of weeks, the closing after about a year of negotiations and approvals of the investment into Bank by the National Bank of Canada. National Bank of Canada is a commercial bank in Canada, 6th largest of our banks. It has, I believe, 400 or 500 branches across Canada, and it has a growing international presence. It's not as big as some of the other commercial banks in Canada in terms of their international work, but they do have other elements of investment here in Asia. And they had been interested in Mongolia and Kasbank in particular for a number of years now. And an opportunity has arisen. One of the shareholders, Mercy Corps, a long-term shareholder in the bank, had decided they could use that money for other work here in Mongolia, and they were looking for someone to take over their share. And NBC has done that. It's a fascinating investment. It's one at a time when other people perhaps think of Mongolia as a difficult place to invest in. It's a fascinating investment not only because of its timing, but also the fact that it is a strategic investment. They do not intend merely to give their money to the bank and wait to see what happens. They want to be involved, and they have an interest which is large enough now to ensure them a seat on the board. And there will be an NBC, a National Bank of Canada executive, who will sit on the board of Jager Financial, the holding company of Kasbank.
That's
and it's a great investment.
And also a lot that will be, I think, mutually beneficial learning, in particular for Mongolian commercial bank, to learn the skills, management, the way how they see the world together. And that's important in the region as well, I think.
Absolutely.
A small country like Mongolia.
But if I could come back to my initial statement, because I think that there are two sides to your question about investment. And one is that very solid sort of OT-style investment. However, there is another chunk of the investment field which is a concern. And that is also related to mining, but particularly related to exploration and mining and small mining companies. And the reality is their future is not so certain as OT. And they are not so comfortable with the way the investment environment here is.
That's what I was going to ask
developing.
about, and in particular about this company, because it had played an important role in the economy of this country. And today I don't think that they are deserving the attitude or, say, feelings of people in whatever way, but still they are in uncertainty.
There is so much mineral wealth in this country, that is clear. And if the rules and the regulations were predictable and fair and transparent, they don't necessarily have to give the store away. That's not what investors are looking for. But they're looking for transparency, predictability. They need to know that the rules that they work under when they start their investment will be the same rules that they have to work under a year or 2 or 3 or 4 down the road, and that others around them are also working under the same rules. And so that kind of treatment, if it were available to them, there'd be many more Canadian companies here in Mongolia.
Have
than
you
there are
expressed
today.
a concern about Borrow Gold to the government?
Absolutely. But it's not just Borrow, it's all the Canadian mining companies. I mean, I used to work in Peru. In 2005 to 2007, I worked in the Canadian Embassy in Peru, and I was the commercial or the trade commissioner. And at that time, we had a list of 75 Canadian companies who had some significant interest in Peru. We may not have met all of those 75 companies, but they were junior exploration companies with a license, with maybe even doing some work, maybe even with a small mine, but it was a good number of Canadian companies. In my view, there should be at least half that many here in Mongolia. It's a little further.
How
it's a
many
little
of them are
less.
now?
Maybe 5.
5. But there used to be more.
There used to be more. There was about 20, 25, I'm told, in around 2002, 2004.
Yes.
But the environment has not been sufficiently strong. Now, right now, it's not just the investment environment or the regulatory environment. It's also the fact that the commodities market is in a worldwide slump. But that will turn around. And juniors will continue to be looking for opportunities.
Exactly. That was the time before Mongolia was very clear on the map, in our mining map of the world. That was the similar situation. And then, in fact, this Ivanhoe Mines, Mr. Friedland, he played an important role in Mekong, Mongolia, very clear, almost shining like a star at a certain point of mining world.
That was the observation that was made to me when I met Speaker Enkhpul for the first time back in March last year, or this year, I should say. He said Canada put Mongolia on the world's mining map.
Exactly. You see? Okay. So we have talked about, well, the real situation with investment in mining, and the other side, which is keep going on. But there are certain other possible sectors.
Absolutely.
Which can be developed successfully between two of our countries. What are those sectors?
Well, the one that's most obvious is agriculture. I have been up to Selenge province and to Bulgan province. I have not seen as much of the agriculture areas as I would like, but I have seen huge fields of wheat. And I have seen beef cattle farms and I've seen feedlots here in Mongolia that Canadian technology and Canadian approaches can be very helpful to improve. There's all other crops that could be brought here. Canada, interestingly enough, for people who think of lentils as being an Indian product, Canada is the world's largest exporter of pulses, lentils and beans. Those are crops that could quite viably be grown here in Mongolia as alternatives to wheat or for feed crops even as well. And so there's a lot of opportunity for us still to be working together.
Particularly because we have similar weather in that sense, cold, very cold winter.
We do. Some of the areas of Saskatchewan that form our wheat basket, so to speak, have temperatures and seasons which are very similar to Mongolia. It is one of the things that we share as an affinity, or at least an ability to endure very cold temperatures.
What kind of things or developments you have been observing in that sense of agriculture cooperation?
Well, first of all, it must be said that there have already been some significant links between, the farmers of Selenge and the University of Saskatchewan, for example. We had a good team of farmers come to a farm show in June of this year. They went to Saskatoon. We'll continue to explore those links. I'm hoping to get back to Canada in March and stop by the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon and talk to folks about that sort of thing. So, there are links that we can build on, and they have to do with that industry, the wheat industry and the dryland farming industry. But I think there's also more that we can do in the area of beef cattle farming. There's a Canadian farmer up in Bulgan province who's doing a really fascinating work with a feedlot. A feedlot is something that is relatively unknown to Mongolian farmers, but essentially he buys Mongolian cattle at about a year and a half old, and then he takes them into his feedlot and feeds them nothing but very high quality grain for a period of 3 or 4 months without them wandering around, so that they wear off the good feed, and he fattens them up and he produces a quality of meat that garners a lot more profit here in the city of UB than your average.
He's selling in UB.
He's selling here in UB.
And how big the cow is becoming? Large?
Oh, they don't become quite as large as the cattle of Alberta do, which reach 1,500 pounds. But these are 900,000 pound cows by the time they're slaughtered.
It's about 450 kilos.
Right.
Well, 450 kilos is quite big also here in Mongolia.
It's still relatively small by Alberta standards, but for Mongolia,
it is.
Yes.
No, because the animals are different type.
Of course.
Because grass, it's grass, pasture land animals. They go themselves. Then you suddenly, they walk a lot, and now you keep them in a log, and then feed them with what?
Generally, it's a high protein grain like barley or oats that
Which he grows himself?
Which he tries to grow himself. This was a tough year. He had a...
See, what does his experience saying that Mongolians in that way, growing the whole feeds, whole materials here in the country, and make a feed, and they can
yes.
give to animal. And
well, I think there's some really interesting ideas that he is bringing to Mongolia, things that are being done in other places, that if they're adapted for the Mongolian market, will enhance the value of Mongolian beef, will enhance the exportability of Mongolian beef, and will enhance the livelihood of Mongolian farmers.
I will be very happy to know him more and to share his experience with all broader Mongolian territories, people who is also trying to do the similar work. And we talk about agriculture. In any other sector you see potentially we can go together?
Well, again, the reality of our similar climates means that we have some similar challenges in terms of construction, in terms of roads, in terms of other things that we have to build. We might be able to find ways to share those technologies and those advantages as well. That's definitely an area we're looking in. We've talked about the financial sector. We will continue to look for opportunities in informatics and other forms of technology. You may be intrigued to know that the ballot counting systems, for example, that are the topic these days of some political discussion, are in fact from a company, although it now has its head office in Colorado, it was originally a Canadian company.
So it has a good track record.
It has a fantastic track record.
The machines they were using were all around the world.
Absolutely.
And they had the idea, people here suspicion is that somebody here made a program that in such a way that they can be on the one side winning.
But that would only be possible if they were voting machines. But they're not voting machines. You don't press a button on a screen to vote and then you wonder what happens afterwards. No, you mark your ballot and it gets fed into the machine and the machine counts the ballots.
So there shouldn't be technically any mistake.
And if you are at all concerned about it afterwards, there's a printout of all of the ballots and you can look at all the ballots and you can compare the printout to what the machine says to what, if you want to do a hand
That's
count.
what I would think. If there's any dispute, let's just
it's entirely verifiable.
Okay, so
and it's a very reliable technology, and every time that the machines are double checked against the hand count the hand counts verifies that the machine has done it correctly. It's a very solid technology. It's originally Canadian, and I'm very proud that Canada has also contributed to the electoral reliability of Mongolia in this way.
Wow. Ambassador, at the end, I would like to ask a few questions about you, about your family.
Sure.
Please tell us about your family.
Oh, well, I miss them terribly. My wife and I are pleased and blessed to have 5 children.
Wow.
And our children are all adults now. The youngest is in university in Ottawa. He's 22, but the oldest is already 34. And we have 3 married children, and those 3 each have children of their own. And so we're also grandparents to 7 children.
5 children and 7 grandchildren.
Big family. When we get together around the table, just my wife and I and our kids, we're 18 people.
So when you are getting together again?
Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait until May. In May, the youngest one, who's coming to visit here in Mongolia in a few days, will be getting married to his fiancée. And my wife and I have thought that was probably important enough for us to go back to Canada too. And so we will be there in May and the whole family will get together, and I'm really looking forward to it.
You were trained and practiced legal law firm. You have been working for a law company, you are a lawyer. And why you have decided to change to be a diplomat?
You know what? It's interesting to represent a client in court, but it's a fascinating honor to represent your country on the international stage. I have, all through my adult life, I've always represented somebody. I started in sales, representing my company, trying to sell things. I then went into law, representing my client, trying to sell his position to the court. And today I represent my country. And that, I think, is the greatest honor that one can have. It's, you'll forgive me, my heart is in Canada. So Canada for me is the greatest country in the world. And to have the privilege to represent that country.
You are really indeed greatly representing that great nation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for being my guest. And
my pleasure.
Happiness to your colleagues, and particularly to your family and to your children and grandchildren.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. За, хүн жүжигчтэй өнөөдөр манай дефактоны төлөвийн зочноор Канад улсаас Монгол улсад суугаа онц бөгөөд бүрэн эрхт элчин сайд ноён Jager оролцлоо. Баярлалаа.
Энэ бол iPhone 6s. Дэмжих өөрчлөгдөөгүй. Гэхдээ хурууны даралтыг мэдэрнэ. Ингэснээр текстийн мэдээллийг уншихад өөр болсон. Имэйл уншихад, мэдээ уншихад байз чи мэдээ уншдаг гэж үү?
Яп.
Оо тэгэлгүй дээ. Камер нь 4K бичлэг хийж селфи хийхэд дэлгэцэн гэрэлтүүлж өгнө. Энд ч нэг сая лайк цуглуулна да.
Thanks.
Зургнууд нь бас өөрчлөгдөж амьд болсон. Та хүрээд үз. Тийм ээ, энэ бол өөрчлөгдсөн зүйлс.